VE Day was around May the 8th or 9th, I think. And we stayed on there to occupy Germany till July the 4th.
Do you remember what part of Germany you occupied?
Yes, we were in a town called Halle, Halle. And this was the last town we had captured when the war ended. And we stayed there just a matter of maybe a week or two. And then we went back to Le Havre to get on the ship to take us back.
Did you by any chance see any of the concentration camps in Germany?
Yes, we saw one that was rarely heard of, called Nordhausen. Does that sound familiar to you?
It doesn't, but I know there were a lot of smaller.
There were thousands of concentration camps that you never heard about all over Europe. Nordhausen was one of the most important ones that we liberated. It was a slave labor camp, and it consisted of about a mile-long tunnel through a mountain. This was outside of Leipzig, by the way. And this is where they assembled the V-2 rockets using slave labor. They'd have a flatbed train and tracks running the entire length of the tunnel. And they brought in the raw materials at one end of the tunnel, and the slave laborers would assemble it, and it came out of the tunnel. The rocket was completely assembled and was launched from there to bomb London. And that was pretty pathetic. They would work them to death, literally, and bring the bodies out of the tunnel and not even bury them, just lay them on the ground. And when we were there, there was a pyramid of human bodies 5 or 6 feet high. And we went into Leipzig, Nordhausen rather, and made some of the civilians bury the bodies. And they pleaded innocent, like they never heard of it. Wir sind unschuldig, we are innocent. You could smell the stench from those bodies a mile away. They didn't know what was happening, according to them.
So were you involved with medically treating any of the prisoners?
German prisoners?
No, not the German, the whoever was in the concentration camp.
No, when we saw them, they were either dead or they evacuated some of them. But we did treat German soldiers who we captured, and they treated some of ours. They paid attention to the Geneva Convention, some of them anyway.
I noticed on this form that you delivered a baby to a German civilian woman. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, they were calling me Dr. Stork for a while. There was a young German girl, I guess she must have been about 22, 23. Her husband was in the German Luftwaffe, the Air Force. And she was about 8.5 months pregnant. And we were in a town called Germscheid, which was under very heavy bombardment. And there were about 40 German civilians down in the basement of this old farmhouse. And this woman was among them, and she was in active labor. And they called me over, the civilians, and said, "Can you help deliver the baby?" I see what I can do. And sure enough, we delivered a baby boy. He was fine, and I was there for 2 or 3 days, so I was able to pack her and treat her for after the birth. In fact, she asked me for my name, and she gave the little boy his middle name. Hans Josef Wolfgang was his name. So that little boy should be close to 70 years old if he's still alive.
Wow. But
the funny thing about that was what do I know about, being an obstetrician? We were getting instructions from way back behind the lines from some of the regimental aide surgeons. And he was telling me what to do and how to remove the afterbirth and tying the cord and all that. And he say, get some catgut and tie the umbilical cord 3 inches above the womb and 3 inches from the child's navel. I say, hey, I'm not in the general hospital here. Don't talk to me about catgut. Or no, I used a gauze bandage and wrapped it up
Sure.
and made an improvised rope out of it to tie the umbilical cord. But the baby was fine, and so was she, and
And
she
mother
was
was
very, very
fine.
grateful. We were getting instructions, as I said, from the surgeon, and the guys in the foxholes were able to hear by radio the instructions, and they're saying, boy, that's some code we're using these days. The Germans will never understand that language.
So I see that, I don't want to embarrass you, but I see you have a ton of medals. One of them being the Purple Heart medal,
Yeah,
which obviously means you were injured.
right.
Can you tell us about that?
We were on the banks of the Rhine River, and there was a lot of mortar fire, and one mortar shell exploded maybe 10 feet away. I hit the ground, and it caught a piece of shrapnel on my left instep, which, by the way, is still there. I was wondering whether they'd be able to remove it. I was sent back for about 30 days in the hospital for recuperation. And I asked them if they're going to remove it. They said, well, that shrapnel is sterile when it goes in, so it's not going to cause any infection. But if we attempt to remove it, we could hit a tendon or something down there and you might be crippled. I'd suggest you leave it alone. It may work its way out over the years and may not, but as long as it doesn't bother you, just forget about it. He said, it'll act like a great barometer. You'll know when it's going to rain, which is true. But it's still in there. But I haven't felt too much pain with it. I'm a walker. I walk a couple miles every day, even to this day.
So there's no limp from
No limp.
Did you set off the alarm at the airport going through the metal detector?
I warned them about that, but no, it doesn't bother too much. It was we call that $1 million wound because I was able to go back to combat after 30 days.
So most of the injuries that you saw, what were they? What was it from? Was it mostly from artillery, or was it from small arms, or
I think
See if you can describe-
sniper fire mostly, I would say. And artillery also. But they had a lot of mines, landmines buried all over. And some of them were designed not to kill, but to incapacitate you. They knew that if you had a wounded soldier, he'd be out of commission, and the 3 or 4 doctors maybe, and combat medics, they put a lot of guys out of commission, weaken the forces. So they called them shoe mines, and they had one particular mine that they buried. You step on it, would jump up about 4 feet or 3 feet, and then explode. So it would hit your lower extremities.
Bouncing Betty? I think they called that.
Bouncing Betty, yes, that's exactly right. Yeah,
So you ran across a
yeah.
lot of
We
those.
ran, of course, those two. But sniper fire was pretty wicked too, because we did a lot of forest fighting, and the Germans were pretty good with telescopic sight rifles, and they picked us off pretty well, especially in Nordhausen, going into that concentration camp. We had to clear out a wooded area first, and it was like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, they picked us off left and right. And they should have had artillery fire clean out that forest before we went in. That
And
would
they
make
didn't
life
do
a
that.
lot easier for us, but they didn't.
So is there anything else that you can tell us about your service years that you'd like to talk about for the record?
Well, for 70 years I've been trying to forget those years, so I'm not too well prepared to just ad lib my way through.
I understand, and we appreciate that, your time and talking to us. So after the service, what did you do?
Well, I went back into the business with my folks, and I only lasted about 3 or 4 years before I got fed up. And after I married, I went to the insurance business, and I became an insurance broker, and I spent 40 years in that before retiring.
In Cherry Hill?
Camden County, though actually I was licensed in the state of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, so I didn't have any territory. I just could go just about wherever I wanted to sell and have a conference with people, estate planning and that sort of thing.
And so, do you have kids?
Yes, I have a son living in Wilmington, Delaware. He's a restaurateur. And I have a daughter who is in the environmental protection business with the government, and she's in Harrisburg, PA.
And grandkids?
Pardon me?
Grandkids?
2 granddaughters, yes.
Great.
Yes. My son has 2 daughters. My daughter never had any children.
I guess I don't have many other questions to ask. So, unless you have something to add, I guess
No,
that's
I
about
think
it.
you touched most of the bases.
It sounds like a tough 2 years.
Yeah, even crossing the Atlantic wasn't easy. We crossed on the Mauritania, which was a sister ship to the Queen Mary. And what I remember most about the Mauritania is that for the 6 days that it took us to cross, or 5 days, we had nothing to do, so we all carved our names into the mahogany railing that went around that entire boat. And you know, they turned the ship back into a luxury liner and varnished that railing and preserved all those carvings that we had to do. We zigzagged to cross the Atlantic. We had no escort, but you know, it takes 6 minutes for a German sub to line us up in their shooting apparatus. So we just zigzagged our way, which made it kind of slow. But the Mauritania was a big troop ship.
And how'd you get back?
On another troop ship from Le Havre, and we came into New York Harbor. And it was not a beautiful sight seeing the Statue of Liberty after that.
Did you have a chance to come home at that point, or did you just go right out west?
We got 30 days recuperation from Germany before we went out to the West Coast.
So did you come to back to Camden, or just?
Well, yes. My folks were still alive, and I lived with them before I went over, and I came back to East Camden, and that's where I holed up for the 30 days until I went out to the West Coast.